Welcome to another episode of ChaxChat. Join Chad Chelius and me, Dax Castro, where each week we wax poetic about document accessibility topics, tips, and the struggle of remediation and compliance. So sit back, grab your favorite mug of whatever, and let's get started.
Welcome, everybody. Today's podcast is sponsored by Venngage. Venngage is a design platform that's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. Venngage doesn't just simplify your design process, but it takes it up a notch higher with built-in accessibility features. Whether you're looking to run an accessibility check on your designs or export them in the PDF UA format, Venngage has you covered. So head on over to venngage.com and check them out. My name is Chad Chelius. I'm an Adobe certified instructor and one of the accessibility wizards at Chax Training and Consulting.
And my name is Dax Castro. I am also an accessibility wizard, as we are calling ourselves, over at Chax Training and Consulting. And Chad and I are both certified as accessible document specialists by the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. If you'd like your certification, head over to accessibilityassociation.org/certifications. Right now, they have a lot of really great webinars and things going on. It's a lot of good stuff. Even if you don't go for the certification, just being part of the organization is a great thing.
Yeah, they've had. I recently saw they've got some webinars on the European
Yes.
the EEU. Is that what it is?
Yep, the EN 301549. So all of the EAU and kind of the EU accessibility situation going on.
Yep,
and that's
regulations.
It's the oversight committees and the new regulations and how that's all panning out. So a lot of interesting stuff going on over there. It's definitely
For sure.
stuff.
For sure.
Yeah. Dude, koi pond, koi talk. We're gonna remember this time. It's been a while. My koi are now kind of coming into spring. So they're being a lot more active and the sun is shining. They're eating 3 or 4 times a day, which is really great. And it's funny, koi can see 30 feet outside of the aquarium. So when I walk by my screen door, my sliding door, and they see me, one of them will see me and then he'll get all excited and come up to the window like, you're coming out here, right? And then the other one will see him getting excited. And then all of a sudden they're all just right there at the window, like greedy little water pigs waiting to get food, man.
Yeah, they think they're going to be fed, right?
Yeah. So
now, are some of your koi on a plane?
Not yet. So my koi, the broker that I just went to Japan and bought some koi. My broker will be there. Actually, I think he's there now. And he'll buy a bunch, take mine, put them in together with his. They'll ship out to his facility somewhere Mid-East, back east in the United States. They'll stay there for about a month and then they'll come here. So
Gotcha.
Got some time.
Very cool.
Got some time.
Yeah.
So awesome stuff. Well, today, Chad, we wanted to talk about, or you specifically wanted to talk about some of the PDF cleanups that you have to do inside PowerPoint. Or in a PDF after you've made a PowerPoint. And I will tell you, I had a conversation with Clint Covington, who is the product manager at Microsoft for Word and PowerPoint. And his goal is that we don't ever go to PDF. His goal is that PowerPoint in itself is a fully functional, accessible platform that you don't need to then make it a PDF and turn it into something else to give it to people. And I thought that was a pretty honorable goal. And I'm not against that idea, but currently we don't really have that capability, right? I mean, for those listening, just so you know, a source file of a PowerPoint is not as accessible as a PDF. It just isn't yet. It will be, it'll get there, but show notes, speaker notes and animations and where stuff is, all of that's kind of still geared for designers, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I respect that approach, right? I mean, I think it's a cool idea. Like, let's just make the PowerPoint accessible. But I think, there are some inherent challenges with that approach, which is, okay, you give somebody the PowerPoint file and they can edit it, right? They can make changes to that PowerPoint file. And if you're okay with that, well, then okay, that's a perfectly good approach. But if you want it more locked down, right? And you and I know that a PDF is never truly locked down, but if you want it to be a little more locked down than being freely editable, PDF may still be the way you want to go.
There is actually a solution for that within PowerPoint currently right now. So if you go into PowerPoint and you go into the to the file menu and save as, actually it is under the where is it? Under the info tab, you can manage. Let's see. No, I'm at a loss here. Give me just a second.
Is it protect presentation?
No, there is a way to it's under export. I'm sorry. So it's under export. So when you go to file export, you have a way to package the presentation as it says for CD, but it's not really for CD anymore. It creates a single file that really isn't. It's like if you were just in presentation mode inside your PowerPoint document, that's kind of what it's like. So I could imagine that if you were in PowerPoint, you could just put it in presentation mode. And when someone gets that PowerPoint file, they're really just in presentation mode and they can hear the content on the screen and move through it at their leisure, moving from slide to slide, that kind of thing. So
that format will be accessible.
Yeah, well, and that's the goal, is to have that be accessible. So the problem becomes we're still a bit behind on some of the capabilities of a PowerPoint, not because of PowerPoint itself, but because of how people are using it, right? We know we can fix the reading order in our PowerPoint. It's very easy using either the selection pane for those on a Mac or the reading order pane for those on a PC. You can mark something as decorative, but what you can't do is any kind of heading structure that is beyond the H1 for the title slide and H2 for every other slide. So a lot of people will use PowerPoint as a layout tool for creating kind of more brochure style slides or slides that have multiple headings. And that's always a problem, right?
Yeah, it is. It is. So yeah, I mean, I guess, we could start this conversation with the things that we are able to do in PowerPoint, right?
Sure.
Like the things we are able to accomplish, right? And so let's start with adding structure to our document, right? So PowerPoint does give us the ability to add heading structure to textual content in our document. It's somewhat limiting, right? Because it leverages the master slides, right? And when you're in your master slides, I'm going to bring PowerPoint up so I can look at it while I'm talking. But when you're in your master slides in PowerPoint, there's one master slide that is kind of like the master for everything.
Yep.
Right.
The parent slide.
And say that again.
The parent slide. It's
the parent slide. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that parent slide, if you add a title to that slide, will export as an H1 tag. Right. And then any other master pages that you use, if you add text to the title field on that slide, they will output as an H2.
Right.
Okay. Now that's pretty much it for document structure, right, Dax? I mean, if you have a slide that you laid out and you've got subheads or, third or fourth level headings, they will not output as heading tags. And so jumping ahead to the cleanup stage, that's one of the things we often have to do in the cleanup portion of the equation, where they're going to output as P tags. You may need to change them to H3, H4, whatever you want within your PDF file.
Well, I think there's two considerations there. One is, are you designing your PowerPoint with accessibility in mind? And so if you are, should you be adding those secondary headings, knowing that PowerPoint really isn't geared for that? And two, are you accounting for the time it's going to take you? Is the trade-off worth it for the time it's going to take for you to go into the Acrobat document afterward and output those headings, go in there and change those tags?
Yeah, I agree 100%, Dax, right? Because, and again, the problem, if you do that, right, you do change the P tags to an H3 or an H4, we all live in the same world where our boss is going to come to us or the client is going to come to us and say, hey, we've got a bunch of changes we need to make to this presentation. We need you to re-export the PDF. And now all that work is lost and you got to do it all over again.
Well, and many times our clients are giving those PowerPoints to other organizations. So that PowerPoint is their product and they're selling it or giving it to another organization. Maybe a parent organization's giving it to a broker or to a salesperson. And you're getting this accessible, supposedly accessible presentation. And visually, it is accessible. When you make the presentation and you provide it as a slideshow, there's good color contrast and the headings are distinctive and all of those visual things. But the moment that you put it in the hands of that broker or that salesperson to then make a PDF of it, because often we hear, hey, that's a great slide deck. Can I have a PDF of it? Now they have to know that somebody needs to go in and change that H2 and H3 or H4, add those secondary headings. And
absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, you're right. I think it's really good to think about designing with accessibility in mind in PowerPoint.
Right.
Because PowerPoint itself is designed to really only have one main heading per slide.
Right.
Right. And for those who are not as familiar with PowerPoint, every slide has a title field that basically comes from the master where you can put that main heading for that slide. And if you abide by that rule, right, you just always put one heading per slide and then you've got ancillary text that's kind of supporting that heading, you're going to be in pretty good shape. Right.
Unless you have a series of 3 slides and all of them are about the same topic. And then the Microsoft Accessibility Assistant, which is huge improvement over what it's been. If you have not been in PowerPoint in a while and you're used to the old Microsoft Accessibility Checker, go back in. It's definitely improved. But one of the things it still does is it requires that every title slide be unique. And what do? Key terms on the first slide, then key terms continued on the second slide. Right. You can't put key terms continued on the third slide because that's the same as the second one. So now you've got to do additional continued or continued to or something unique.
Continued more, right?
Yes. Still continuing, right? Something like that. But the idea here is that unfortunately there's no way for you to pass the Microsoft checker or the Microsoft Assistant and not have a title on those slides. But the reality is, in a PDF, many times you have multiple slides that are all about the same topic and you might not have a heading. It is totally okay, 100% accessible to have a heading on page 3 and then 3 supporting slides that all are about the heading that was on page 3, and your next heading isn't until page 5 or 6.
Right.
It is totally okay.
So what we're saying is it won't pass the Microsoft checker, but fundamentally it's okay, right?
Because it takes the human review, right? You've got to look at it and go, okay, I have a heading here. Do I need a heading somewhere else? And if I don't, I'm okay, because it's always that automated check and manual review that we harp so much on.
Because it's also a bad practice to have like main heading and then main heading continued, right?
Right.
Because you're inserting redundant information that the user's got to navigate through to get to the real meat of the content.
Well, it's that designing with accessibility in mind. Here's the thing we always see. I see this over and over again. 2 things. 1, this page left intentionally blank because they've got a blank page on one side. And 2, continued on next page. right? If I'm a screen reader user, I don't
Mm-hmm.
care that there's a blank page in the document. Don't tell me that. I don't want to hear it. Just ignore it and let me skip over it. And I don't care if it's continued on the next page. I don't need a marker to tell me that unless it's continued on page 26. And then I've got to go find page 26. And that could be an issue because remember, when you're navigating in a document, typically it's just the order of the tags, but it would be pretty jarring to be reading on page 6 and then all of a sudden it jumps you to page 13. And then how do you get back to page 6 again from that spot? It creates a whole unique perspective. So having that continued on page 13 text and maybe a link to page 13 in it would be a good user experience, but that's an instance where you would want it. But in most cases, continued on next page is just ridiculous and not needed.
Disruptive. Yeah. I mean, It's absolutely disruptive to the user. Right. And, it might help. I think I've said this on our podcast before. What, a lot of us that are in this industry, right? We are sighted users, right? And we're making content to benefit users of various disabilities. But what I think it's important for us all to remember is that the concept of a page is strictly for the benefit of the sighted user, right? The sighted user is who needs a page, right? We as sighted users need real estate on which our content needs to go.
Right.
But for users of assistive technology, the concept of a page is relatively irrelevant. Now, I know a lot of screen readers do announce when a user goes from one page to another,
right?
But it's very brief, it's very quick, and it's not really a critical part of their navigation experience, right? They're simply navigating through the content, they're reading the headings, and they're simply, going through the content in a linear fashion. So the page, although it's important to us as sighted users, not very important to users of AT.
Well, I think it is important from a relevance standpoint when you're having a conversation. But,
of course,
all of us who read a document never go heading, paragraph, all that stuff. And then at the end go, oh, page 15, and then moves on to the next page. No one reads the page number. You might look at what the page number is to go, oh, hey, I got to remember where I'm at. What page was this again? Right. And there is a shortcut key you can use to pull up page number or to go to page number, both in Acrobat itself and as a shortcut within NVDA or JAWS.
Agreed.
So heading structure, super important. Thinking about what your heading structure is going to be. But just remember, you don't necessarily need a heading on every slide if your final export is to PowerPoint, is to PDF. However, just realize that headings are navigation points. And I was working in a document earlier today, and we were going through questions. There were 150 questions in this document. And to move from one question to the next question, because they didn't tag it as a list or any other thing, it literally was down to try to get through to the next question. And that's annoying. I would have much preferred the number for the question be tagged as a heading level, or the beginning of it tagged as a heading level and the paragraph to follow. But that's thinking about the user experience. So
for sure.
So go ahead, Chad.
Well, I was going to talk about something that PowerPoint does pretty well, right? Because I don't want to keep harping on the bad things about PowerPoint, right? So one of the areas where PowerPoint does do a good job is for writing alternate text for your images, right? Sure. So, every graphic that you put in your document either needs to be described or needs to be ignored, right? And that's going to kind of vary depending on what your content is. So whenever you put a graphic element, and again, I'm using the term graphic in a very generic sense because it could be a photo, it could be a chart, it could be a graph, it could be whatever, they all need to be described. And it's super simple to do in PowerPoint. You simply right click on the image and say, edit alt text.
It's view alt text.
View alt text. Yeah. Thank you. So view alt text is going to bring up a little panel off to the side where it gives you room where you can add the alt text for that image.
Right. Or you can mark it as decorative by checking the little box underneath it.
Well, exactly. So in that same window that pops up, the alt text window, there's also a checkbox where you could say decorative, right? So this is a decision we need to make for every image. It's either it has value and we describe it, or it has no value and we artifact it or mark it as decorative.
So there is a new thing in the accessibility assistant called learning tip. So under that, well, it's no longer a checkbox. There's a button that says mark as decorative. And I would suggest that that button needs a better color contrast around the border of that button, because currently it fails color contrast for UI UX. It's not indicated that it's a button, but it is. It says mark as decorative. Underneath that, there's a little piece of text that says learning tip. And the learning tip says image descriptions, or it says provide alt text. Image descriptions, also known as alt text, play a crucial role for users dependent on screen readers. The descriptions are read out, enabling the user to access and understand the images. For purely decorative images that don't convey essential information, marking them as decorative ensures that they are appropriately skipped by screen readers, enhancing accessibility. So there is some learning tips along the way inside the new accessibility assistant, which I'm pretty excited about. It's nice little guardrails in there.
That's really interesting, Dax, because I do not have that.
If you're on a Mac, you will not have most of the accessibility. Oh, you're on PC?
I'm on Windows. Yeah.
Then you probably aren't in.
I'm checking for updates now. So I wonder if maybe I didn't run an update.
No, because so what you did, so when you went, if you right click, and this is a good distinction for everybody. If you right click and go to view alt text, you get a far different interface. For me, when I do that, I get alt text. It gives me a little bit of an outline, and then the box that you can enter the text in. Underneath it, there's a box that you should never click on in a million years called Generate Alt Text for Me. And then below that is mark as decorative. However, if you go up to Review, Check Accessibility, and Alt Text, it is a different pane. It is a different set of boxes for that image. And there you get the accessibility assistance alt text that will give you that same box, generate description, mark as decorative, and then that whole learning tip. Are you getting that, Chad?
I see it now. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, Dax. So if you access the alt text via the assistant, you get a slightly different alt text window, and then I see that learning tip under there. Yeah, that's a really good tip to provide to our listeners, right? I mean, because like I said, I went there as you were talking. I'm like, I'm not seeing it, right? You know what I mean? So,
well, because we were talking about right-clicking and going to view alt text rather than me. I went up to review accessibility because I wanted to see the assistant, and the assistant really is a great thing. So
it's pretty helpful. I mean, you know, it in a lot of ways, it reminds me of Venngage. You know, we've talked about that in the past, right? Where it just kind of guides you through the process. And I really think that's what's needed for a lot of users, right? I mean,
because not everybody's an expert, right?
No.
I just spent the entire 3-hour morning teaching clinical alt text for hospital and surgical and x-rays and stain slides and all sorts of stuff. It was it's very much in the weeds. It is exactly what you'd expect. It is not for the faint of heart, and it requires an expert, right? I mean, we can talk about what to do and how to do it, but it's always going to need to be reviewed by a doctor in that case, because you really need to be very exact and clinical about what's going on. So
for sure.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, I've gotten in trouble, Dax, with writing alt text. I was teaching a client who was in the financial industry, and they were like, well, how would you write alt text for this graph? Right. And so I'm a layman, right? I mean, I'm not a finance person, but I said, you know, chart showing fund returns over the last 10 years, showing steady increase over the 10-year period of time. And I got yelled at because they are not allowed to allude to the fact that the fund did well. You know what I
But
mean?
see, that's a difference. I would disagree with you there. I would say that that's not something they could yell at you for, because you didn't say did well. You didn't say increased earnings. I mean, and you could even say increased earnings, because if it started at 12, if it started at a return of $7 in 2020, and by 2026 it was $28, that
Like,
is absolutely
there's
an
no argument,
increase.
right? Like,
Yeah,
there's
there's
no
an
argument
increase.
that it increased over time, right?
Right. But what you can't do is make a qualitative statement. You can make a quantitative statement like it increased from this level to this level, but you can't make a qualitative statement by saying this fund, it shows a great average rate of return for whatever from one thing to another, because that word great implies positive influence.
Right.
And so you have to be very careful about how you word things. Quantitative is okay. Qualitative is different. You don't
Right.
want to have a qualitative statement. I had a really long legal conversation with a couple of lawyers at a financial institution about that distinction. And it is no problem to say that there is a rising trend from X in this year to Y in this year. But what you can't say is that, investors can expect to earn a positive rate of
Exactly.
return over blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And as shown in this bar chart, right?
Yeah.
Even though it may show that, you can't make that qualitative statement.
That's a good point. And I mean, maybe they misunderstood what I was
Sure.
saying, because I don't think I was being qualitative. I think I was just being quantitative. I was just
You
saying,
were.
because I'm looking at the chart and I'm like, well, it started down here and it ended up
Yep.
here. So it grew over time, right?
Well, see,
But-
and that's where organizations like financial organizations have a misconception about what they can and can't say. And this is why our classes are so important. And this don't want to sound like a pitch for our classes, but we
Right.
really do teach you the best practices, and we stand by what we talk about. It is not just our opinion. These are things that we can show you, and statistically, I mean, we can give you the guidance because we know it's solid guidance, right? And we've been doing this for so long. I've been doing it I feel like alt text has been something I've been doing for a very long time. And our secrets of writing effective alt text, our alt text for clinical and scientific images, right? Both of those classes are really great classes to take. Our data visualizations class, which is coming up here in a bit, that's another great class. That's kind of what are we describing? How do we make this visually accessible along with the alt text that goes with it? So, yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Right.
Well, I know we kind of got off on a tangent here. So that's really alt text and decorative elements. The other thing in that is reading order, right?
Mhm.
Reading order is one of those things that is kind of hard. And I heard someone say that if you don't use the placeholders in your slides, that assistive technology will not read the content or will read it out of order. And I said, not true. You need to set the reading order using the selection pane for people on a Mac or the reading order pane for people on a PC. And if you do that, it doesn't matter if you use none of the placeholders. Obviously, you want to use the title placeholder so you get a title, but the body copy, whether it's an image or a set of bullets, it doesn't matter, because most of the time we're copying and pasting something from some other source anyway. There's going to be a lot more than just one text block on that slide.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you on that. But to clarify, you still have the selection pane on Windows.
Sure.
But on Windows, you also have the reading order pane. And
right.
And if you're smart, you'll use the reading order pane, because
right.
the selection pane, unfortunately, forces you to order your content from bottom to top, which equals the reading order from beginning to end.
Well, it also doesn't have the numbers. It doesn't tell you what number something is. And the only way you can turn something on or off is not through the selection pane. Because if you use the little eyeball to turn something on or off in the selection pane, you're literally hiding it from the slide as a whole. But in the reading order pane, you have a little checkbox. And if I want to mark something decorative that's on that slide, I just uncheck it.
It's super convenient. It's so convenient. I don't understand why they didn't add it on the Mac side.
I can tell you why. I can tell you why. They're having a hard time getting the interface to work on a Mac.
Really?
Getting access to those metadata values, they can't get it to work. So they're working on it, but it's not just we don't want to do it for Mac. It's technically there are some barriers in the Apple iOS getting access to that, bridging those 2 points of connection. So it is more than just we'll get to it. It's definitely,
well, hopefully we see it eventually, but because it's very, I mean, for that reason, I prefer to use PowerPoint on Windows because it's just more robust. But
and you can double click on any of the image elements in your reading order panel and edit the alt text right there, like literally right there in that reading order panel. So you don't have to right click and do edit alt text or go to the alt text panel or run the assistant or any of that. You can just do it all right there from the reading order panel.
While we're on the topic of Mac versus Windows, something that you and I discovered recently is that when you export to the PDF format on Mac, it fails to embed the fonts that you used in that presentation.
If your font is a custom font, we have a client with a custom font. They have a font that's not part of the installed fonts in the document. And so their font is it's a third-party font. And that font does not get added to the font library on export. And so what ends up happening is it defaults to Arial or Calibri or whatever it is. And I think it's Calibri, it defaults to Calibri. So their font doesn't make it across. The workaround is to open that PDF or open that PowerPoint file inside OneDrive on the web and then use OneDrive to export to PDF, and then it will embed the font and it will come out.
And that's right. Now that you mentioned that, I remember that being the solution, which is bizarre, right? It's just
it's a Windows emulator. I mean, what you're doing at that point, if you're on a Mac and you're in OneDrive, you're in a Windows machine because OneDrive is a Windows platform. So yeah. Awesome. All right. So reading order. The one other thing to note is that so we used to tout the idea of save as Adobe PDF when you export to PDF. I will tell you that my advice there has 180 degree flipped, because save as and change the drop down to PDF. Microsoft's exporter for Acrobat has fixed so many of the bad things that used to happen inside PowerPoint that I no longer even try to export using Acrobat's exporter, because one of the things is the page number placeholder. If you have it in your reading order, where whatever item is next in the reading order after the page number placeholder automatically gets artifacted if you export using the Acrobat exporter.
The PDF maker.
Yeah, the PDF maker. That figure tags, if you have a text box with a colored background and you export it, it will give you a figure with your paragraph text nested inside of it. All sorts of other little things that are just like really wonky. So save yourself the headache. Always do file, save as, change that drop down for the file type to PDF, and you're going to avoid some of the issues that have been plaguing Acrobat for a long time, because it's just the export feature.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, they haven't updated the PDF maker in quite a long time, right? Like we haven't seen an updated version of that. So I feel like it's a situation where it's just behind, like it's behind the times, and where Microsoft is putting a little bit more effort into the save as
a lot more.
The other thing you'll experience with PowerPoint is it'll create a lot of extra container tags. Right.
Yeah.
So each slide becomes its own container, right? Yep. Not a problem. I'm not even talking about this as a fundamental problem. It's more of a problem for remediators than it is for anybody,
Sure.
because to the user of AT, it's going to sound just fine as long as your tags are good. But for the remediator, it's kind of a pain to have to open up all those containers, look inside of them. So, again, is it a significant problem? No, but as a remediator, I often will get rid of those container tags,
Well, and there's no easy way to do that without third-party tools. You open up
Exactly.
Common Look, it's one click, flatten tags. You open up Access PDF, it's a couple clicks to just level up the certain content. But I wish Acrobat, Adobe, listen to me now, give me the ability to flatten the tags tree. It seems like a pretty easy thing to be able to do. I should be able to right click on my document tag and hit flatten tags. And it would remove all the section and part and div and article and all those tags and just flatten everything down to the base tags.
It's one of the big things that I've been using PDFix for.
Sure.
Because using PDFix, I can drop a file in there and I can run an action on it and it'll just obliterate all those container tags.
Yeah.
And that way, when I open my PDF, I can just focus on the tags that matter, and that's how I like to work. Not everybody does. There's a lot of people that we teach, right, who like to have a container for each page, or in this case, a container for each slide. Nothing wrong with that. I don't want to push my opinion on people. You know what I mean? Just because I like to work that way, I don't want people to think that they have to too. If you like the containers, keep them. Don't, there's not a thing wrong with them. But yeah, so that's one thing you will notice is a lot of containers coming out of PowerPoint.
Awesome. We have two more things to cover, Chad, before the end of this episode. I want to make sure that we get to them. All right. Second one is table structure. If you're in a PowerPoint and you have anything other than a simple table, that means no merge cells, just straight columns and rows. Your first column can be your row header, and your first row can be your column header. It's always so awkward to say.
It is.
You check a little box in your table design. It's the table design docker in the upper left-hand corner. It's first column, first row. If you do that, your table will come out with the right scope and everything set right. If you go any more complex than that at all, you're screwed. You have to go into the Acrobat document and set the scope for one or more of the different directions, because it doesn't understand how to apply scope and span it applies span just fine, but it doesn't understand how to apply scope in a complex table. So just know that if you've got two rows or your first two rows are column headers, you're never going to get that second row to be labeled as a TH in the PowerPoint. So you're going to have to go do that inside Acrobat. And it matters because, it matters because the screen reader is going to read those cells before it reads the data cell. And if you're missing a whole row, then you could change the meaning of that table very easily.
So you're sure that it assigns the scope to the table?
Pretty sure for a simple table, it assigns both the scope and the TH and the scope.
Because I always experienced that when I did that in Word and in PowerPoint, it did not assign the scope. And that's true. It still does not assign the scope. I just ran a quick test, and it will define it as a header cell, right? So you're right, Dax. If you do, first column or header row, it will make them THs, but it fails to define the scope of those cells.
Well, and the reason that scope matters so much is because Acrobat, actually JAWS and NVDA, without scope assigned, will assume that the first row has a scope of column, and that but it will not assume that the first column has any kind of scope at all. So if your first column is a row header and it describes the things to the right, it's not going to get voiced without you assigning scope to it. So making sure that you're able to do that is super important and meaningful. And so just by checking that box, you are not off the hook to be able to make sure that that document is in fact accessible. So yeah, no, Chad, I exported and it gave me the scope for both, for the column headers. I have a scope of column.
And you did save as?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. We're going to have to dive into that a little bit deeper. I wonder if you have an updated version, like a newer version.
Well,
of
my
PowerPoint.
build, if I go to File, Options, and then I don't know where it is. General?
I think it's under Info.
Probably File.
Or no, Account. So
Office 365.
I think
Version build 2503. So 2020, it's the last numbers are .20208.
20208. Okay, I'm 20122.
Yeah, so you're a couple versions behind.
So it sounds like I need to update my copy. No, but you know what? When I run the updater, it says you're up to date.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna do a first column here and see if I don't get the same thing. File, save as, change it to PDF like you're supposed to, and we're gonna call this table 2. Save. Open up Acrobat. File. Open. Table 2. Yeah, I got scope of column and scope of row for both. So it does set it if you use the well, in this case, I'm using a templated table. So when I check that box for first column and first row, it changed the colors for me, right?
Okay, hold on. So that means you have a table style applied.
Right. So can I go in and undo the table style? Clear table. There we go. So I now have a non-style applied table. File, save as, change this, and we'll call this table 3. And I still have the checkbox for first column and first row. File, open, table 3. Yep, still have a scope of row. Still have a scope. So it's not dependent on the table style. I thought maybe you might have had something there, Chad, where it was dependent on the table style, but in fact, no. So get the latest build, guys. Make sure you're up to date and you should be okay. However, just know that if you have multiple column or multiple row headers, you really do need to go into the Acrobat document and do additional work to make those tables accessible. And it does matter for the people using assistive technology, because you need those associations to get to the right headings that are being voiced as you move from data cell to data cell. So the last thing I want to talk about is animations. Animations inside PowerPoint. If you have animations in your PowerPoint that build to the end slide that is finished and there's nothing overlapping on top of each other, okay, no big deal. You have nothing really to worry about. That animation is going to be just fine. But if you've got an animation that hides something and shows something else, all of that stuff just gets jumbled all on top of each other. So you need to be thinking about that when you go to export to PDF. Maybe you need to break those slides into 2 slides so that you have finished slides that look like the point at which the animation is supposed to stop or pause. So just know that animations are cool, but they're going to cost you extra work. In fact, I really try very hard to keep my animations to single slide builds so that if it's a complex animation, I'll break it apart already. So that way I don't have to do any extra work when I go to export it. It's just ready to go as you go. So yeah.
Good tips there, Dax.
Awesome. Speaking of tips, Chad, we do have document accessibility for PowerPoint class, and in that class we have a 31-page manual that goes through a lot of, almost so much more than what we've covered here today. But it also includes a PowerPoint checklist, and it's a great thing to have. In fact, the next place that we are going to present that class is at Creative Pro Week.
That's right.
Where I will be speaking and you will be speaking as well, Chad. So Creative Pro Week, I am doing accessible PowerPoint presentations. And so you should go head on over to creativepro.com and sign up to see me at that conference. We're in Phoenix this year again, and I am so excited to be back there and maybe meet some of you guys.
Yeah. The website, I think it's creativeproweek.com. But
is it Creative Pro Week?
I think you get there either place will take you there.
Yeah, Creative Pro and creativeproweek.com will both take you there.
Okay,
the conference website is Creative Pro Week. The organization is Creative Pro. So either way, you're going to be able to get there. In fact, they just updated the Creative Pro website, .com website. So
they just came out
if you have not been there in a bit, go look.
Yeah, it's a new website.
Yeah.
With a pretty nice design, I have to say.
And there's some really cool logos under there down by the Creative Pro Partner and Solutions. There's one I recognize right there. Chax Training and Consulting is a Creative Pro partner. So good stuff.
And just to wrap up our discussion, Dax, I just output a table with a table style applied, and I got scope.
Awesome.
So there's got to be a connection with having a table style, because when I did it the first time, it was just like a generic table.
Mm-hmm.
But when I had a style applied, I did get the scope. So you're absolutely right.
The point there is always check your PDFs to ensure that it has scope. And in order to do that, you would right click on your table inside of Acrobat and go to Table Editor. Mm-hmm. Then on the cell for you can pick any TH, either column or row header, right click and go to Cell Properties. You'll see scope in the drop down of column or row. And you want to make sure that's set. So
absolutely.
Good stuff. Awesome. Well, we are at the end of another podcast, Chad.
We are. And once again, we'd like to thank Venngage for being our sponsor. Just to remind you that Venngage is not just a design platform, and it's not just about creating stunning visuals, but also about inclusivity and accessibility. So head on over to venngage.com. My name is Chad Chelius.
And my name is Dax Castro, where every other week we unravel accessibility for you.
Thanks, guys.